to Drawn Onward. I'm your host, Teresa Jansen, and today I'm talking with Shannon Anderson about how to manage when your good life gets turned upside down unexpectedly. Well, welcome to Drawn Onward. I'm your host, Teresa Jansen, and today I have a really special guest with me today. I have Shannon Anderson, one of the contributing authors to the Life Repurposed book project. Welcome, Shannon.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, so glad to have you here. I'm really excited about this book, and any collaborative project I think is amazing because our stories together are so much more powerful than what they are individually. So I'd like to just jump right into a little bit of your story, if you don't mind, and tell us a little bit about your background and maybe what led up to the Life Repurposed book.
My background is as a teacher. So for the last 25 years, I have taught elementary school as well as there were 5 or 6 years in there that I was also teaching at the college level in the evenings. But then in the last 10 years, I started writing children's books. And so writing has become a pretty big part of my life. As a matter of fact, this past year, I took a sabbatical leave and to focus on, traveling and doing author visits and speaking, all of those types of things. Little did I know when I requested the sabbatical leave that we would have a global pandemic and and COVID would happen. My story is called Accepting the Big Picture. And it was kind of a whole analogy of a jigsaw puzzle, because, sometimes in life we're given some of the pieces, but we're not quite sure how they're all supposed to fit together. Or we might feel like we don't get to see the cover of the box of the puzzle. And, God knows what that picture is supposed to look like. He knows the end. He knows where every piece is supposed to go, but we don't always get the pieces that we want when we want them. And sometimes we might feel like we have pieces to the wrong puzzle. And that's kind of how I was feeling. I was feeling like, I felt like I was supposed to make this decision. I felt like, when I prayed that this was what I was supposed to do, but then all these things started happening. It was like someone took the pieces that I did have in place and they took the card table that the puzzle was on and flipped it. And all the pieces were scattered all over again. So, that's kind of how I was feeling my life was looking like. And so my piece that I wrote, the story that I wrote for her was, a piece of the big picture and the whole analogy of the puzzle. And I was able to show that through that struggle, that because I was able to trust and because I was able to pray through that I was also able to see the blessings that happened even despite all of the bad things, or in my mind, bad things were happening. So for example, my daughter who was in college, this is her senior year. And then she's getting married right after college, like literally a week after graduation is her wedding date. And so, as a mom, this is my oldest daughter leaving. It's really hard when you have someone that's leaving the nest. And so one of the blessings of this whole thing was she ended up having a very extended time at home from Thanksgiving break till beyond Christmas break, where we got to spend some good quality time together. And not only that, but she's an education major. So I got to help her through a lot of her planning and classes and preparation for student teaching. And that was just a huge blessing. But then the other thing is, because everything was turned virtual, I was still able to do a lot of speaking engagements. And as a matter of fact, there were many that I wouldn't have been able to do if they were in person, like me talking to you right now in Africa, or, right. Last week I had 2 interviews in Australia on Zoom, of course, but, those probably wouldn't have been possible had we not gotten so familiar with Zoom and it became such an easy platform to be able to communicate. There were some weeks that I had conferences that I was speaking at in 3 different states, all in the span of 1 week. And there's no way I could have done that had we been in person. So there are definitely things that when I look back now that I was able to do that I wouldn't have been able to do if it had been in person. So, you just have to kind of look at, and trust that the pieces of your puzzle, they'll all come together in the end. And, someday we will get to see that big picture. But for now, we have to just trust and keep praying and keep doing what we know is right. And then things work out, and we get to have new pieces as we go along the way.
I just love your analogy of the jigsaw puzzle. My mom and I are big jigsaw puzzle people. And it's one of the things I miss about being in Africa. I have never brought a jigsaw puzzle here, and I've never seen one for sale here either. Oh. And when I was in the States over the holidays, we did some puzzles together. And it's such a great analogy for life, because it is like doing a jigsaw puzzle without the box lid.
Yes.
Yeah, we don't know what that puzzle is going to look like, and we're just going with the clues that are in front of us. But I have to tell you, some of my pieces always end up in the sofa cushions or under the table. And I think a lot of people are feeling that way right now. Like you had said, someone flipped the table and the pieces are scattered, and there are some that are just missing. But inevitably, they do come, they're found eventually.
That's right.
One of the things I like about this book, too, is that a lot of the stories happened some time ago for people. Like my story happened quite a number of years ago, but has been part of my journey ever since. And you are writing a story, or you wrote a story that is quite contemporary, very recent. And yet it's also timeless. People can relate to the rug being pulled out or the puzzle pieces being scattered by anything, this time a global pandemic. Now, I want to talk about your beautiful backdrop a little bit. I see a whole lot of books behind you. You said that for those who are seeing this on video, they get to see the beautiful books behind you. If people are listening to the audio, they just have to trust me. But you have quite a number of children's books that you have written, and that's really very exciting. And you've written for teachers. Have you done other narrative nonfiction pieces like this one that's in Life Repurposed?
Yes, I do have. This came out just in February, so just last month. And this is called A Deed a Day. And this is Growing in Grace Through Kindness and Compassion. And so this book actually is from a story of earlier in my life of something where my family, and this was when my girls were younger, my family went through this period where everything was just hustle and bustle, and we were busy, and, going from one activity to the next, and everything just felt kind of mindless. And I was kind of having a heavy heart. And to kind of make a long story short, basically, I prayed again for discernment, like what do we need to do to bring more meaning in? And what do we need to do to not feel like we are being selfish? Because that's where I felt like we were. Like it was, you get up in the morning and how can I get this, and this done? And thinking about what the day will bring to you rather than what you can bring to the day or to others. And so I ended up praying about it, and I decided that in order for us to be thinking of others more, that we needed to do for others more. And so I went to a store and I bought this composition notebook, and I wrote on it Deed Diary. And I had a little family meeting, and I sat my girls down and my husband, and, I said, this is going to be something we're going to just try, but I think it would be really great if we could do something nice for someone every day. And then at dinner time, I will write in this deed diary what we did. And it became this wonderful experience because I could tell it was starting to work when my girls at night were talking about what they were going to do for someone the next day, or when they would come running to my classroom after school because they couldn't wait to share the reaction, that someone had, or the smile on their face when they did this thing for them. And it didn't have to be something that cost money. It could have been something like a sincere compliment or just making a card for them or whatever that might be. And so each night at dinner, I would get this out and I would say, I would write the date and I would put me, Matt, Emily, Madison. And I would just say, hey, Maddie, what did you do for someone today? Emily, what did you do? And we would talk about, well, how did they react when that happened? Or, what joy did they have? Or what did they say? Those types of things. And it became this wonderful thing where we had all of these ripple effects. So one of the ripple effects was that my daughter had a conversation at school with someone and had said that they didn't know Jesus and they had never been to church. And she said that they didn't have a Bible, and she asked if for her act of kindness the next day, if we could give this student a Bible. And this was when she was in third grade. And so I sent a Bible, like one of the children's adventure Bibles, off to school with her, and she gave it away. And so that next night at dinner, when we talked about that, she said, well, this other girl saw me give her the Bible, and she asked if we could get her a Bible too. And Jesse over here, he said he's never been to church and he doesn't have a Bible. And it became this thing where we were getting all of these Bibles and handing them out at school, at a public school, mind you. And then, the clincher was one morning when we were going to school, she handed up this half sheet of paper to me, and I asked what it was. And she said, well, can you make copies of this when we get to school? These kids don't understand the Bible. It's hard to read. And so I went through last night. Okay, she was 9 years old. I went through the Bible last night and I looked for places that they might have heard of, like Noah's Ark, or when Jesus was born, or when God created the earth. And she wrote these down, and she wrote where to find the verses. And she said, we're meeting under the big tree on recess, and I'm going to do a Bible study with them. And so
Wow.
I just, my eyes were filled with tears. I'm driving, and I was like, of course we can make copies of this for you. And so she did. She taught these kids about their Bibles. And so that was just one of the ripple effects. But because of that, I decided to find out if I could start a Christian fellowship group at school, at our public school. I got permission. It ended up becoming the biggest club in our entire school. We met the hour before school started on Fridays. It was amazing. And so it was just all of those different things that just kept rippling and rippling from just us, seeking out things to do that were, either just to bring a smile to someone's face, or we saw a need. And, because of all of those things happening, it grew our faith, and it grew our gratitude, and it grew our blessings. And so from there, I had gone to this Christian writing conference, and I was sharing this story about, how this all happened and came to be with an editor during an appointment. And that particular editor asked me, well, would you be willing to write this out as a whole story of your own, like not as part of an anthology, but could you go into the details of, how did this keep rippling, and how did this grow your faith, and how did this become, it became these things that I was doing in my classroom, and, all of that. And so that's how this was born.
And I love that book. And how many books were you publishing in 1 year? You said 5 children's and 2 for teachers?
Well, the teacher books had just come out, and then I had 2 growth mindset books coming out from the same publisher, and my first biography of Benjamin Franklin came out. And then just yesterday was the book birthday for Too Shy to Say Hi, which is about a little girl who has social anxiety. So a lot of my books do have social and emotional topics, because I, as a teacher, want to be able to have stories that kids can relate to the characters, and maybe that can launch a discussion that can help them through some of those issues. So I have a book on perfectionism and on shyness now. I have one on an underachiever, and of course on growth mindset, about believing in yourself and learning from your mistakes. So yeah, there were quite a few books coming out all in 1 year, which doesn't happen normally, but because it was through multiple publishers, it just happened to work out that way. So.
Right. I was expecting 4 coming out just in the last 6 months of 2020, and none of them came out in 2020, and 2 this week. So I'm very excited about the Life Repurposed. I know. Yeah, it is exciting. And I went to the US to do book launches and signings and everything, and nothing happened. So thank you for sharing your story. And I really feel connected with other people who've had trials during the pandemic. But not just the pandemic, any time that life just dumps your puzzle pieces, that can happen at any time. So tell us, how can we connect with you? Website, social media, all of those things. What's the best way?
Sure. So my website is pretty easy. It's shannonisteaching.com. And so if you go on there, if you want to contact me, you can just go on the contact me page, and it has all my information about my books. And I do workshops now for aspiring writers. So I teach picture book writing and next steps after you have your story written. I also mentor authors and teachers. And so that's probably the best way to get a hold of me. I'm also on all of the social media. So Twitter is @ShannonTeaches.
Well, Shannon, thanks so much for being with us today. Let me ask you, I almost hate to ask this, but what is coming up next for you, if you happen to know?
Well, God only knows.
Right.
But I recently had to give my principal my decision on if I'm coming back next year for teaching, because the end of my sabbatical would be, in a few months. And because I didn't have the opportunity to truly experience the sabbatical as I had hoped, I actually just requested one more year. So that will give me the opportunity to explore and to see, if that's really something that I want to do more with, or, it'll at least give me one more year to get more writing in and to get to do some of those author visits, which I really enjoy. I absolutely love getting to talk to kids and get them excited about reading and writing. So that's kind of my next steps. I'm working on some other book projects, but for the most part, that's kind of where I'm at, just continuing this year. Only hopefully next school year will open up so that it can be more in person.
Well, thank you for being with us today, and we will watch to see what actually comes next. I think we've all learned to hold our plans loosely in this environment. Right. Yeah, for sure. And thanks again for being in the book. I'm excited to be in there with you, and all of our stories are stronger together.
DrawnOnwarD is more than an amazing palindrome. It's a production of TeresaJansen.com.